Welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Thursday, August 11th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories viewed here, read here, can also be found on our website at IndianCountryNews.com. And here are some of the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and who knows where else. But today, the Seneca Nation of Western New York is marking the latest payment from the U.S. government under the 1794 Canandaigua Treaty. Seneca President Robert Odawi Porter and other tribal officials planned a news conference to formally accept for the 216th consecutive year the payment. It consists of a piece of cloth and a share of $4,500 distributed each year to the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy that entered into the peace treaty with President George Washington. The Seneca say the annual payment demonstrates that in the eyes of the United States, the provisions of that treaty still must be met. The Seneca have been odds with New York State over its attempt to tax cigarette sales, an action that many tribes across the country say violates everybody's treaty rights. And today we talk with Osage member and author, Professor of Native American Studies, Robert Allen Warrior from the University of Illinois. Robert Allen Warrior, thanks for joining the Native News Update today. We want to talk a little bit about education, but the first question I always have is, how are the Illini doing down south?
The Fighting Illini here at the University of Illinois are doing okay. As our program here at American Indian Studies has taken the lead on our campus in trying to bring about a much better campus climate in the aftermath of the retirement of the former mascot here, who most people know as Chief Alinawek. And we still face a lot of problems here on campus. We and our colleagues over at Native American House, our student support unit, are always looking for ways to really bring the campus into the 21st century. And to do that, I think we're really trying to get the campus to do two more things involving the music. Even though the chief no longer dances at halftime of basketball, football, volleyball, other games, there's still the music they play. So they still play the music, and it gives people who really want the chief to come back an opportunity to stand and scowl and be very negative. There's lots of other things they can be doing at halftime than scowling, feeling negative about what used to be. And there's also a tom-tom Hollywood Indian music that's played during timeouts, and that's another reminder of this previous era that we'd really like to see done away with.
It either reminds people of the old mascot, or that they need to break out a can of Ham's beer or something like that?
I guess so. I don't know. You'd have to ask them. I don't really attend sports here because it's a very negative environment. Empirical research now shows that exposure to this kind of athletic tradition involving native caricatures, native music, or caricatured native music, these have a negative impact upon young people, young native people, as they're exposed to them. And that empirical data makes me, as a parent, really not want to expose my children to those things. So I really try to stay away from those athletic events here at Illinois until they kind of finally do away with the things that I think are damaging, that the research really shows are damaging to Native kids. I got to always say on this point that it's interesting to note that the damage that's done to Native kids that's shown in the research, white students who are exposed to these same traditions get a boost in their self-esteem from seeing them. So I think this is where, for whatever reason underlies reasons underlie that psychological research, that there's something that draws people to those traditions, that gives them a better feeling about themselves. I just find that to be a misplaced feeling when it's done at the expense of somebody else. And certainly when it's done at the expense of my kids, I'm going to be pretty careful around it.
Right. I had somebody, researcher, call me up and ask me when the first mascot appeared, and I said at the Boston Tea Party.
Exactly. Sure. That's a great answer to that question.
Yeah. It's all about making a campus friendly for ethnic diversity, and you've got students there. How many are expecting this year, and what kind of advice would you give parents in general and students returning to campus this year? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I'm always thinking about the students who are coming to campus for the first time, especially at a university like this. We have 42,000 students on campus, 32,000 undergraduates. We bring in about a class of about 6,000 fresh people every year, first-year students, along with a couple of thousand more new graduate students, transfer students. It can be a really different kind of experience for people, a big culture shock to arrive onto a big college campus like this. Going to college is just something that's usually different no matter what the size of the school, whether it's a very small school with a couple of thousand students, a mid-sized state university that's 10, 12, 18,000 students, or one of these mega universities like us at 42,000, something like the University of Texas was 60,000. Right. So I always like to try to get people to think a lot about how they can be smart in making that transition, especially if they're somebody like I was when I went to college, came from a background where we didn't have a lot. And to go to school with a bunch of people who have a lot more than I had was pretty difficult. And it's pretty important to be smart. I saw a story this last week that just really made me think about what it means to go back to school, which is that this buying season and selling season for the retailers like Walmart and Kmart, Target, grocery stores, Walgreens, this is the second biggest buying season of the year after Christmas. That means that those retail giants are looking for reasons to sell all of us things at this time of year. And that's always true when you're in a college town like I usually live in, like I've lived in really my entire adult life. You go out to Target this week and next week, you go out to Kmart, Walmart, you'll see 18-year-olds and their parents wheeling around with a cart full of hampers and irons and, storage containers, sheets. And a lot of those things are things that people really need. But one of the things to ask yourself when you're trying to be smart about making this transition is, do I really need all of this stuff? Am I going to get the use out of this stuff that I want? I heard a story in a news report last week that somebody bought a lamp because it was on sale and everybody was buying that lamp. They couldn't use it in the dormitory that their son or daughter was moving into because it was not safe. It wasn't deemed safe within the dorm. So that was $20 that was thrown down the drain.
Interesting. And are people shopping wiser now? I mean, there's less money than ever before. Tuition is higher. I mean, it seems to me that students are probably getting through college with a lot less than ever before.
They are, and they need to, and they're, especially the students who are coming from backgrounds where they don't have as much money as some others do. And yet at the same time, what we see is that there's a lot of pressure on campus, and especially since we have actually a lower number of those students from disadvantaged backgrounds economically who are able to afford to come into these schools where tuition keeps going up, wages are not going up, unemployment is certainly not going down. Those fewer students who are able to actually make it onto campus, sometimes they feel even more pressure to fit in, and sometimes fitting in means spending more money. I just ask students to always be really smart. Don't get caught up in this particular moment. It's a very emotional moment for parents, for students who are making that break with their parents. Right. It's a really good time to just kind of step back and say, how can I be smart about the money that I have? Do I really need this thing? Do I really need the same hamper that my roommate's going to be buying? Do I need all of the clothes that I think that I need? Maybe I should kind of get the lay of the land before I start committing myself to certain lifestyles.
What about credit cards? It used to be that when people went to school, boy, the credit card company's right there. Do you need a credit card, debit card? What kind of a card?
That started in the 80s when I was in college, and it's really something that you want to be smart about. Money is the main thing I think that students on campuses need to think about. Those credit card companies want to bring you in right now and get you some credit limit. Maybe it's $300, maybe it's $1,200. Down the road, that's going to be your $20,000 anvil that's sitting around your neck that you can't get away from. It's giving yourself a very high-priced student loan when you sign up for that kind of credit card. No matter what the deal they're giving you is, be smart about your money because you're the only one in the end that's going to have to pay that back, or maybe your parents, but somebody's going to pay it back.
For the prudent student or parent, is there still money available for scholarships and grants? Can people still get into college without having a $100,000 tuition bill left over when they get out?
The money like that is available, and you've got to be smart about looking around for that money. You got to be looking around for those resources. Talk to people. That's one of the main things on a college campus is that you talk to people. Nothing ever comes to people on a campus like this, especially a large one like the University of Illinois, unless you go talk to somebody, unless you ask for help. Go to that financial aid officer, explain who you are, explain your background, explain what resources might be available, and ask how you can do that work on your own with help from somebody else. But just, I think, by asking for help, being friendly, and breaking the ice with that person to say, I need help to be here. There was a moment back when I was in college, and I had a financial aid officer just, we went through all the numbers, and I was going to have to leave. And we went through it again after we talked a little bit, and he was able to kind of find just enough for me to be able to stay. And you need to find people like that on a college campus. You need to become somebody who really gets on the internet and looks for those kind of resources.
Indeed. We only have about a minute left here. Your best advice, like carry an extra piece of fry bread if you're going to introduce yourself to people, that breaks the ice or anything like that?
I'd say just really quickly, along with being smart about money, which is always important, you want to be smart about your time. You want to remember why you're on campus, and that's to finish up the degree that you wanted to start with. So you always want to keep that in mind. You don't want to pressure yourself so much with your time that you don't do the things that are part of college life, having fun, meeting new people, going to ball games, and doing all the sorts of things that are fun. But you want to keep an eye on your time. You also want to be smart about asking for help. And I think that it's one of these things where you just be smart about your boundaries that you put around you. Realize when you've gotten yourself in over your head, and go find somebody that can help you. It might be your roommate. It might be a resident assistant. It could also be your parents. Right. And they want to hear from you. They want to know what's going on. They want to be involved in all of this and keeping in touch with them. I think that especially for students who are from Native communities, whether those are urban reservation communities, remembering those people back home who are still really interested in your life and wanting to help you out is really important advice. And the last thing I would say, Paul, is that take advantage of that environment that you're in if you're a college student. You'll never be so exposed to so many different people, so many different places around the world, funky films and funky majors, things that you never thought you might be interested in. Take advantage of it. It's one of the great things about going to college.
I'm hearing that 5 years is becoming a more acceptable number of years to go, which is still about half the time that it took Charlie Hill to graduate, but 5 years is becoming more of an acceptable number all the time?
Absolutely. It takes as long as it takes. And I think the main thing we want to do is keep students really tied into the college experience so that they finish. I always kind of say that it's being a college professor, being an advisor is a little bit like being a car salesman. You want to keep people on the lot because you want them to drive off the lot with a new car. Well, what we want to do on college campuses is we want you to stick around and leave with that piece of paper that says you got that degree. And however long it takes you, sometimes people have to work a little bit more than other people do. Sometimes people just take a little bit longer. They change their major. They do something. Something comes up in their life where they need to go home and spend some time there for a while. You just never want to get yourself bogged down in feeling like you're behind, because you're not as far behind as somebody else, like Charlie Hill, and you're in the game. You're going to look around you and see all different kinds of people. Some people start this process with a couple of kids or whatever other sorts of things on the plate. But it's just, this is your time. It's your time to go succeed and your time to write your own story of success.
We'll talk more about that, like the returning adult senior student. Give me a phone number and email if someone wants to get a hold of you.
They can get a hold of me at rwarrior@illinois.edu. They can find our webpage at ais.illinois.edu, and be happy to hear from people and for them to find out about the resources that are available in an American Indian Studies program like ours.
Thanks for joining with us, Robert. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, great to be here.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country. On this edition of the Native News Update, we want to say miigwech for joining with us, and come back again soon.